Scott, it was probably the foundation of, I think, making me what I am today.
So are you saying that the discipline that later Woody Hayes and Don Shula demanded, you got some of that from the Boy Scouts?
Of course, I knew how to take it anyway. I mean, the correctiveness of both those guys were, especially Woody Hayes, he was a legend in his own time. He was a special guy to me and really got me through school, really helped a lot. And then when I came here with the Colts, I had Weeb Eubank when I first came here. And then, Shula came along and left town, and then Don McCafferty came in, and Unitas and I got traded out to San Diego. I retired, he went out there and tried to play a couple more years. And San Diego wasn't very good, so I decided to hang it up.
Let me tell the young people, like under 60, a little bit about you. The rest would know who you are, but this man was drafted in the first round by the Baltimore Colts. He was actually the 7th pick in the first round. You think about that today, that guy's cashing millions of dollars, 7th pick in the first round. What was your deal?
You wouldn't believe it if I told you, but I will tell you because it's, everybody thinks football players make a lot of money back in those days. Number one draft choice. My salary was $10,000. I got a $4,000 bonus, and that was it. And then we changed one of the rules at the beginning. When I first came with the Colts, I crushed a couple of vertebrae in my neck, and they put me on injured waiver. And back in those days, if you were on injured waiver, you were a free agent, because I didn't change anything. So my good friend Art Modell, who had just taken over the Cleveland Browns, called me up, and my hometown was Cleveland. And he says, Tom, we'd like to take a look and see how your neck is, and blah, blah. So they bring me up to the Cleveland Clinic. I go up there, get all the x-rays. He says, your neck's healing very well. We'd like you to come and play for the Cleveland Browns. And he says, and we're also going to offer you a 30% raise. I said, wow, another $3,000. Boy, I'm in. So I came back, and we had a general manager by the name of Don Kellett here. And I went up to Mr. Kellett, and I said, Mr. Kellett, I have the opportunity to go to Cleveland. It's my hometown. I'd really like to go back there. And he says, how much money did they offer you? And I said, like a dummy, I said $3,000. He says, we'll match it. I could have said $10,000, but I didn't. But I stayed here, and I made Baltimore my home. It's been here since 1961. My wife and I got married in 1962. I made her finish her education because I didn't want to pay for it. And couldn't afford to, by the way. And we moved back here to Baltimore, and we've had a tremendous run. It's been a great town, greatest fans in the world here, Scott.
Well, go ahead, give my hand. I don't want to take anything away from today's players, but Tom came from an era where we saw guys like John Unitas, Brooks Robinson, Artie Donovan, who have stayed in this town 50-some years. Lenny Moore is another one. Jim Parker, the late Jim Parker. Guys who came here, stayed here, and constantly gave back to the community that they raised their families in. And today, it's a much bigger business today, and it's not a knock on these players, but most of them have homes somewhere else in the off-season. They're a little more protected than these guys were, who show up at every church breakfast, Boy Scout luncheon Tom Manny has been at. And it was a special time, and a love affair with this town and those sports stars, not just the Colts, but the Boog Powells and the Jim Palmers and the Brooks Robinsons, is a special thing that I don't ever think we'll see duplicated again. And there isn't anything that's happened in this town over the last 50 years in football. When I came to town in 1980, Tom and I did the Colt preseason games. So he had a legacy as a Colts player, broadcaster. We also broadcast the Baltimore Stars and the USFL.
Of which I owned a piece of that action.
Yeah, yeah.
I was a Canadian. My father was a professional hockey player. Came out of Canada, broke in with the Detroit Red Wings when he was about 19 years of age, and played 17 years professional hockey. And my dad, and it is a funny story, my dad wanted me only to play hockey. And as I grew up, I was going through the ranks, and I moved from an inner city school out to a suburb school where they had football, and never even picked up a football until the 9th grade. And my mother secretly signed me up, and my dad was not happy about it. He came to the first game, and on the first play of the game, a guy came down, clipped me, shattered my knee, and said, "You'll never play sports again." Well, my dad spoke French, and he had a couple nice choice words for me. And he didn't talk to me for 3 months. So I had to prove to him that I could come back. And the biggest thing that really improved me was the ice skating part of it, because not only did it shatter my knee, but about 3 weeks after the operation, I'm out sled riding, and all of a sudden some sled bumps into the side of me, and I feel this squish, squish, squish. And it opened up another incision, so I had to go back in and get it cut out again. So I've had a great career with injuries, so I've had so much fun.
He's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He's a member of the Ohio State Sports Hall of Fame. He's a near Hall of Famer in the NFL, but I've teased him about that for years, because he's one of those guys that's not in the Hall of Fame, but you look at his career, 9,000 total yards, Pro Bowl running back, a member of 2 Super Bowl teams, but he actually is in the Canton Hall of Fame, because in 1965, he became world famous for being a backup quarterback. Tom was a running back, but suddenly John Unitas goes down 1 week, Gary Quazzo, the backup quarterback, goes down the next. The Colts are fighting to get into the playoffs, and they don't have a quarterback. So Don Shula turns over to Tom Matte and says, "Get us into the playoffs, Tom." He's a running back, but it became really the thing that you'll always be noted for most in your life. Talk about 1965.
Scott, it was probably the most challenging experience an athlete could ever have, is to try to fill the shoes of a superstar like a John Unitas, and no way could I do it, but the coaching that he helped me with and the offense he designed around what my capabilities were as a football player were unbelievable. He understood exactly what I could do. Best thing I could do was roll out. Roll one way, roll the other way. If somebody's open, throw the ball. If not, run it. And most of the time I ran it. And I can remember we played the first game against the Los Angeles Rams, and Tommy Bell, the official, one of the greatest officials in the National Football League, is officiating the game, and I'm going around the corner over here, and somebody piles up on me and really gives me a shot, and I turn around and take a swing at him, and he throws a 15-yard penalty on me, and we're walking back to the huddle, and he says, "Tom, you do that again, I'm going to have to throw you out of the game. There are no more quarterbacks, so take it easy." So after the game, I went up to him, and I says, "Tommy," I says, "let me tell you something. You didn't see what happened on that play, and go back and watch the films and take a look at what happened and why I got upset." And about a week after the game was over, he called me up and he says, "You were right, you really got a shot, didn't you?" And I says, "Yeah, I don't get upset unless somebody takes a dirty shot at you." And this guy did. I'm not going to mention his name, but you know, that's the way it is.
Well, I told this story in the early 80s when Tom and I were broadcasting the Colt games on TV. We met for lunch. The Colts were training at Goucher College at the time, and Zeke Bratkowski was the Colts quarterback coach who opposed Tom in the 1965 playoff game that the Packers won in overtime. It's one of the great games in NFL history. And of course, the big controversy in that game was a Don Chandler field goal that sent the game in overtime, that Tom Matte insists to this day, and a lot of other people, that it wasn't any good.
It wasn't any good.
Well,
what are you talking about?
Okay, all right, we can, you know, I'm a 14-year-old kid growing up in northern Michigan. The game was played on December 26th, and that was my Christmas present. Me and my brother got 2 tickets to the game, and I sat right behind the Colt bench, the great seats. And I think I may have even yelled once, "Hey, 41, you're no quarterback, sit down." May have yelled that. I'm not sure. I was young.
Okay.
So anyway, we meet for lunch, and Zeke Bratkowski, who was the quarterback coach for the Colts at the time, grabs his tray, sits down with us, and him and Tom start reliving old memories. And Zeke's a pretty laid-back guy compared to Tom, who might be the loudest guy in the room at times.
Yeah.
And Tom starts right away, "Zeke, you know, we won that game. That kick was no good. You've got my money. You never should have cashed that check." And they're going back and forth. And Zeke, in his humble way, said, "Tom, all I know is they put 3 on the scoreboard, and we were the champions." And it went on a little more. Matte goes back in. I haven't said a word yet. I'm just listening to these 2 NFL legends. And finally, I spoke up. And they both stopped and listened. And I said, "Listen, I'm tired of listening to you guys." I said, "My dad was an iron miner. We didn't have a lot of money in our house. And my parents spent good money to send me and my brother to that game. And we expected to see John Unitas and Bart Starr, and we got stuck with Tom Matte and Zeke Bratkowski."
Another part of that story. Another part.
He used that in his book.
Yeah, yes, I did. And another part of that story was Minneapolis had honored me up there after the season was over, and they had honored Vince Lombardi as a coach of the year and all this kind of stuff. And what I had done is I had made up in my woodworking shop through my scouting efforts, because I knew how to do it. I made a duplicate of the goalpost that they used up in Green Bay. And the one post went straight up like this, and one went up like this, and sort of over. Well, the Minneapolis people just went nuts. They started howling and laughing. They just had such a great laugh on this thing. And the last speaker, of course, was Vince Lombardi, and he had the hammer, which you don't like to, you know, you really sort of stick it to him. And he gets up and he picks it up again, and the whole crowd goes nuts again. And he says, Tom, he looked over at me, he says, Tom, he says, I really don't know if that field goal was good or bad. He says, but when I went to the bank on Monday morning, my check said we were the champions. So I couldn't argue with him on that. But that's another rule that changed, that I had a change of the rule. The following year, they raised the goalpost 20 feet higher and put an official under each goalpost because they blew the call. So that was another one. That's two rules I changed in the NFL. The other one was get all these salaries up for everybody else. I wish they'd take us under their wing a little bit.